Hi everyone, welcome to the Blockchain Legal Landscape panel. Thanks for coming to the Blockchain conference as well. I'm just going to take a few minutes to introduce our panelists over here. So our first panelist is Joshua Ashley Klayman. Josh, a Penn alum, is the founder and CEO of Klayman LLC, a boutique blockchain law firm, and Inflection Point Blockchain Advisors LLC, a blockchain strategy consulting and advisory firm. Known as one of the best blockchain and cryptocurrency lawyers in the world, Josh is recognized by Chambers and Partners as one of the 3 Band 1 ranked US blockchain and cryptocurrency lawyers for 2019. She also chairs the prominent Wall Street Blockchain Alliance legal working group and serves on the WSBA's board of directors. A recognized thought leader in the blockchain space, Josh also is a Forbes contributor for blockchain and crypto matters and is a member of the global Wharton Reg at Tech think tank. She works collaboratively with blockchain leaders from around the world to advance the industry, anticipate and address regulatory concerns, and seize strategic opportunities. She's passionate about advancement of women and other diverse people. To that end, she is a co-founder of the national nonprofit Diversity in Blockchain, Inc., and is a founding member of Collective Future. Our second panelist is Michael Gronager. Michael is the CEO and co-founder of Chainalysis, Inc., the world's leading source of intelligence on digital assets. Prior to founding Chainalysis, Michael was the CEO and co-founder of Kraken, one of the unicorns in the Bitcoin space, and today the world's biggest Bitcoin exchange. Before being bit by the crypto bug in 2011, Michael was running international research infrastructure projects, latest as CEO for the Nordic Data Grid Facility, at the time the biggest distributed storage installation worldwide. Michael has served as a member of the Research Infrastructure EGI Project Management Board, the EGI Technical Collaboration Board, and at present he is a member of the board of Swedish National Supercomputer Center, NSC, as well as the Blockchain and Virtual Currencies Working Group preparing the 5th European Anti-Money Laundering Directive. Our third panelist is Andrea Tinianow. Andrea is the founder of Tinianow Consulting LLC, a boutique consultancy where Andrea works with clients to reimagine and elevate their organizations, identifying new revenue streams and creating strategies that leverage disruptive and cutting-edge technology such as blockchain technology. Andrea has been dubbed the blockchain Tsarina for her role in bringing blockchain to Delaware and securing the first state's imprimatur on the nascent technology in 2016. Recruited by the Markle administration in 2014, Andrea launched the Division of Corporate and International Development for the state of Delaware and founded the Delaware Blockchain Initiative, a first of its kind blockchain endeavor designed to deploy blockchain technology in government and enact blockchain-friendly legislation. Andrea is on the advisory board of the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance and the founding chairperson of its Enterprise Solutions Working Group. She is a frequent contributor to Forbes.com. Markets Media awarded Andrea its Women in Finance Award for excellence in blockchain. And last but not the least, we have Greg Ewing, also a Penn alum. He will be the moderator for the panel. Greg is a partner at CKR Law LLP, co-founder at Secure Credit Systems, a blockchain-based platform that uses encryption and smart contracts to address the significant security, privacy, data integrity, and convenience shortcomings of existing consumer credit history services. He has extensive experience in high-profile international and domestic arbitration and litigation matters, advising all sizes of clients, from Fortune 100 businesses to non-US sovereigns, small businesses, and individuals. He also brings a deep technical background, which allows him to advise clients on all manners of legal, intellectual property, business strategy, privacy, and technological issues. So thank you, all of you, for coming to the conference, and I'll let you go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you for the introductions, and thank you all for being here after lunch. We're going to try and make this a little bit interesting so that everyone stays awake in the post-lunch coma. One of the things that I think is most fascinating about the law and why I'm involved in the law I was originally a software developer and then decided to go to law school, is that the law really is this interaction between sort of the real world, this social contract that we all have, and technology and business. It's that interface that sort of helps us all define how we will interact with each other. And blockchain is a pretty amazing technology in that it seeks to revolutionize some of those ways that we all interact with each other. But the law doesn't go away. So what we want to talk about today are a few areas where we, as panelists, or my panelists here, see the law and blockchain sort of meeting and what we're going to do about it as a society. The first thing, and I don't know if this is an elephant in the room for anyone else, but earlier this week, the SEC issued a no action letter. Has anyone raised their hands? Who has heard of that? Okay, it's a small elephant that only maybe some of us can see. So the SEC, the big question that has been out in the securities world is whether blockchain, whether cryptocurrencies, whether digital securities, whether ICOs, STOs are securities, or whether they are commodities, or what they are and how they're going to be handled. The SEC issued a no action letter on Wednesday to a company called Turnkey Jets, and essentially said, we're not going to come after or enforce against you, Turnkey Jets. And it has some significant potential implications. So to address that elephant in the room, I wanted to turn to Josh and sort of, as someone who has offered and sort of had lots of thoughts about this in the space, I'd love to hear your kind of thoughts.
Hey, Greg, can I just jump in for 1 second? We actually had a quite heated discussion before we came in here, and we all decided that we wanted, after lunch, for all of you to be involved in our conversation, because a lot of these breakouts, there have been panel discussions, and everyone talks, and then at the end, everybody rushes for the questions. And we want to make sure that, at least for this session today, if you have a question, raise your hand, and our moderator, one of us, will bring you into the conversation. You don't need to wait till the end. Okay, I want to hear from Josh now. So sorry, I had to jump in there. Okay.
And before I get to anything, just a quick disclaimer on behalf of all of us on the panel: nothing that we say is legal advice, nothing is investment advice, and nothing is on behalf of our organization necessarily. Right?
And we're not forming attorney-client relations with any of you.
So one of the things I think was exciting about earlier this week, and for those who don't know, so a no action letter, as Greg mentioned, the precedent that is very narrow, right? It's based on, it's limited to the facts of that particular letter. So I'm just going to give a little bit of background since some people have not yet been familiar with this. And the SEC at the same time released a framework through which, like sort of a lens, through which to evaluate whether a sale of a digital token is an investment contract, which is one of several forms of security. Right? So if we look at the securities laws, there's this term investment contract that isn't defined anywhere. And so part of what we may talk about involves something called the Howey test, which is, I guess, some people say 3-prong. Typically we put 4 prongs, right? Investment of money in a common enterprise with a reasonable expectation of profit based solely or primarily on the managerial or entrepreneurial efforts of others. There's been all kinds of debates over the past couple of years that you may have seen about this. One of the things that's significant, in my view, is this. And let me just say also, I have heard some things in the Twitterverse and throughout the space where some people say, okay, well, this is a great big so what, right? That's not my view, okay? I actually think this is quite significant, and I'll say why. So I also will not monopolize this entire thing.
So Josh, just to follow what we were saying, you gave that test, and the idea is that if you have a contract that meets those standards, or one of them, then you...
It has to meet all 4.
Okay.
Right, so all 4 prongs have to be satisfied. I think what's really significant about this no action letter is this. I'm going to boil it down. We have received messages from the regulators and the SEC. First, we heard with the DAO guidance that sometimes a sale of securities, a sale of digital tokens, may be a sale of securities, right? We learned that, and then we went through, and I mean we as a collective legal and technological space, of determining, okay, when is there non-incidental utility, right? When is it not just for investment purposes? Because the DAO was an extreme case. It was a virtual investment fund, right? So we're starting to look through, and after the DAO, everything became a utility token, right? Everyone was saying, no, it's for utility, right? Then we had Munchie, which said actually manner of sale matters. And actually, we've had increasing guidance narrowing down what could possibly not be a security, but we never saw something that wasn't a security. In fact, we had Jay Clayton saying, nearly every ICO I've seen is a sale of securities. This is the first time where we actually have a bedrock and where we have something that says this is not a sale of securities. I think that's momentous.
And Josh, I'm going to respectfully disagree.
Okay.
I will say that I think that it's significant that we got guidance from the SEC. I think anytime the SEC puts something out that provides clarity, that's a good thing. But in this particular case, what the company was providing, I would say was really something, was akin to a prepaid like gift card rather than a blockchain token that was decentralized. And so I think that what was out there, it was like, yes, great, it's not a security, but if you were to read, the letter from the company, you would say, wow, why did they even submit that? Because I could tell you this really doesn't need a blockchain. It's centralized, and it can be done with a gift card just as easily. And you have an interesting idea on that.
So I think, well, a couple of things. One, and I don't know this to be true or false, but one, we don't know if that's what they originally went in with, right? The letter was dated the day before the response by the SEC, and I heard in the media that it took 11 months. So I imagine that it may have been an iterative approach. So they started out with something very different, and I'm just supposing, and that's where it got narrowed into, and that's what the SEC is comfortable with so far.
And again, that's kind of that's a commentary. That's a very interesting if that's what they ended up with the.
And there's two more quick things, and then I promise I will zip it for the panel, or for most of it. But I think a couple of things. As a lawyer who previously, spent literally my entire legal career at a big firm, there is such a hesitation, and I have a piece I'm writing on this, or I've written on this, but it hasn't not yet, but basically saying there is a hesitancy to write a legal opinion, saying that something is not a sale of securities, and rightfully so, right? But if you look at the SEC's no action letter response, right, they say, based on the determination or something like that of the counsel, the legal counsel, and they actually have the legal opinion in the submitted letter saying, in my opinion, this is not a security, and doing the Howey test, right? I think that this provides a baseline for a lot of lawyers to say, okay, I can get comfortable under certain instances to write a legal opinion, because I'm telling you, for risk management purposes, in many cases, it was just a memo, what is this? I think, in my view, my personal view, is that, people should still be going to talk to FinHub with their lawyers, and there should still be a conversation. But lawyers, ultimately, as gatekeepers, they need to stand behind whatever they're advising their clients. They can't just say, oh, here's what it might be. It's up to you. Right? So I think that provides a base. The other thing I'll say is, on the framework itself, whatever you may think about, some people say we already knew this, it doesn't tell us anything new. I think it tells us a lot new. And this is what I think it tells us. I think it emphasizes that, when Hinman's speech came out, just like after the DAO, everything was utility token, and there were all these different things. After Hinman, everything was decentralized, and the focus was on decentralization, as though that were some kind of good in and of itself from a legal perspective. But really, I think, in my personal view, the decentralization aspect was really getting to the efforts of others prong of Howey, right? And the information asymmetry stuff. That's why the framework doesn't go into great detail about decentralization. I think it mentions it once.
So there's one thing there was one thing that caught my eye in that framework discussion, and it's the notion, and it really goes to Josh's point about decentralization, because on the one, if you have decentralization, enough decentralization, then you don't have the efforts of others that are in there working on the network. But what's interesting is there's a new sort of a new term of art that the SEC introduces, which is the AP, the active participant, right, in this framework. And the notion is if you've got an active participant that's doing all sorts of things to the network, well then the SEC is likely going to find that that token is a security. And what's interesting in their analysis is that the SEC says, well, there's a finding that the token's a security, but now you don't think it is. You think it's sufficiently decentralized. And that AP, that original AP is gone, but you have a successor AP. Somebody else. Maybe they were in privy to the contract, and maybe not. But now you have another active participant who is in there doing things and has some sort of control over the network. Well then maybe now you really have a security. Even though it's not the first AP, the first group of people who those investors were relying on when they brought in their tokens. So now you've got this sort of new world where investors aren't relying on the same people, but there's somebody else in control, right? Somebody else in control of the network. Can I just finish this one other little thought? And I just want to say, because I was actually
and then we need to move on.
all right, okay. So so this notion that when you have someone in control, then maybe, to your point, you maybe have asymmetry of information. Maybe investors need to be protected, and that's when the SEC jumps in. And I could draw corollaries to Delaware corporate law, but I'm not going to do it. Okay. We had two questions.
I've just always been confused by this, what decentralization has to do with anything. Because ultimately, it doesn't matter how decentralized the technology may be deployed, there's always decision makers there's always somebody making a decision about the effects of the network. And it isn't 1,000 people, it isn't 10,000 people, it's 5 people, it's 10 people. And so I've just always been confused by that whole, I don't see how that you can rule. And that can change over time in an organization very quickly. So now we're a security token, now we're not. Like we're in and out, even just by the number of people maybe involved. I don't know. I've always been
Join the club.
Like this morning,
befuddled by this whole argument.
this morning, I don't know if you saw Lane Reddick had that picture of the Ethereum core developers sitting on the floor. Those 6 people are the people you're talking about. But Michael, do you have? I know you have thoughts on decentralization. Sort of, what would be your sort of take on that at this point?
So I totally agree that many of the decentralized projects are not really that decentralized. They're about like a few people and they make actions around the network. I would still say that if you move away from what we typically look at, like what the security laws are talking about, none of them are pointing fingers toward Bitcoin, for example, and calling that a security. The debates about Ethereum, and Ethereum today is you have a small group. They hold a lot of the assets themselves. They made very deliberate attempts, for example, around the DAO, where stuff will be bound and other things. You can definitely say there's some kind of governance is still there. If you look at Bitcoin, it's very hard to point fingers at that, and I would still say that's a true decentralized setup.
Today,
that's the case.
So there is still the Bitcoin core that has controlled some of the fork, or is
Yes,
involved.
there is, yeah, but I wouldn't say that necessarily makes it doesn't make it security. But how decentralized is it, you could argue, and again, like today, I think it's very decentralized compared to the other things.
Can I make a comment on decentralization?
Well, let's just actually come back to that in a second. And so I think one of the key things we want to talk about here is, we talk about regulation and law as it relates to sort of what's existing, right? And we talk about regulation and law as it relates to sort of what's in the near future, right? And then we talk about it sort of what's in the distant future. And we sort of have to have all of these approaches in mind as we look at it. Because if you don't have a long-term vision, your short-term vision will be poor, right? So the short-term vision is sort of what are states doing right now? What is Wyoming doing right now? The long-term vision is where are we headed with cryptocurrencies and identity, for instance, as a key factor of do you need identity anymore if we truly have decentralized platforms? So if we could start with sort of the near future and sort of local regulations, state regulations, and then we'll work towards the distant future. Does that work? Good. So right now we do, like I sort of referred to, we've got Wyoming, which is leading the charge, right? Wyoming has put out a bunch of regulations, and they've got in Caitlin Long a very vocal and great leader, right? Many of us are happy to have her doing that. But you also have many states who have sat by the sidelines, right? And I would sort of turn to the panelists to ask you guys, what are your thoughts? Is it better for us to have these states who are sort of leading the charge, and we may end up with this disparate patchwork of law, or is it better for one or two to lead? What are your thoughts? So, Andrea, you're chomping at the bit.
I'm chomping because of my background with the state of Delaware, and we were the first to pass laws, and I was behind that, and that was great, and then not so much now, although there may be things coming. I don't think it's a matter of is it good or is it not good. I think it's great if any of the states see an opportunity and want to provide clarity like Wyoming is doing. I mean, they've really thought through to a large extent, and there's more coming. But if we're going to have a digital economy, what are the questions that need to be resolved? How do we provide clarity? How do we create really common sense types of regulations and not just shoehorn certain types of processes into existing regulations where it's just inefficient and dumb, frankly. So I think I think you're going to have different states doing different things, and and here's the thing, I think it's not so much is it good or bad. I think states are going to do what they do, what they're capable of doing. Smaller states are more nimble, like Delaware. There's less politics. There's always politics, but there are fewer, let's say, obstacles that get in the way of doing sort of smart legislation. So I think we're going to see that. We're going to see more of it. In some states, they're going to play it safe. They're going to like tax. They're going to have legislation about taxing money transmitters or not, or virtual currency businesses. But I think eventually people are going to get more comfortable with the technology. This is something else we've talked about, that this technology creates emotion. And people have to get over the fear and really understand what it's capable of, and then we will see more and more. And I think eventually we might have some patchwork, but maybe not. I think more, it's sort of like there's going to be a tipping point where more lawyers are going to get involved and other professionals and businesses, and they're going to understand it, and it's going to spread, and then we're going to see more and more smart legislation, like what we have in Wyoming.
Question.
I think we have a question, yeah.
To put it bluntly, who cares about Wyoming? You know, they're doing innovative stuff, but I mean, it's a tiny population with no ties to the financial system.
Well,
Can I take that one?
oh yeah, yeah, sure.
Well, no, just hold on.
They invented the LLC. How many LLCs are there in America? I mean, they've actually had a real business.
A financial network. You know, you can have shell corporations there, or Nevada, or such states, and those are going to be effective nationally. But my understanding is, being able to do something in Wyoming doesn't mean you can do things in New York or California.
Actually, I'll just say, do you want to take why? Who cares about Wyoming, or do you want me to do that?
Yeah, let Josh.
Yeah, why?
Okay. I think let me just step aside from Wyoming as Wyoming for a second. I think one of the things is we look a lot to the federal government, right? And you know, I feel like we're incredibly lucky to have Valerie, you know, and HUD, and others involved in the roles that they are. But really, the states, you know, they, in many senses, are, you know, the exact term is, you know, they're laboratories, right?
Yeah.
They're laboratories of innovation, and I do think, I mean, I can't be sure of this. I certainly don't speak for the SEC or others, but I do think that we're seeing at a federal level, whether with regulators or with legislators, you know, that they are being influenced by Wyoming, and I think we're lucky in that respect that Wyoming is smaller and is moving forward, because if a larger state or a more populous state, right, or something, let me just caveat all of what I'm saying. It might come out wrong, but I think we're so lucky to have Klayman and Tyler and others that have taken the time to understand the technology and to work with lawyers in the space and technologists in the space, so that we have a good model that legislators at the federal level and other states and, you know, regulators at the federal level can look at and say, like, okay, we can understand that this makes sense. And my understanding is that the Wyoming, you know, at least for House Bill 70, that's loosely based on FINMA's guidance, right? So these are things that are well thought through that tie to the technology. I think just being able to say, you know, why Wyoming is doing this, and here's why others in the space may find it good. I think that in and of itself is a big thing. Also, can I just
absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, Andrea, you may have seen her articles, you know, pushing back on the Uniform Law Commission, and what Wyoming has done there really has an effect on the entire 50 states. So.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, anytime a single state, whether it's Wyoming, whether it's Delaware, whether it's provides a regulatory framework that is accessible to Americans and American business and American commerce, it doesn't matter that if it's Wyoming or New York or Delaware, it's clarity, and it's a regime that, in my, if it's good, which I think Wyoming's is a solution. So if it's, well, that's why we care. I think Josh's response was really very artful, because it provides a model for other states to look at. But the fact is, practically speaking, if institutional investors want to start moving into digital assets, now there is a regulatory framework for them to move with many of the questions answered, not all, but sure, perfecting a security interest in a digital asset makes a whole lot of sense if you can do it with control as opposed to filing and you have priority. That's in large part what Wyoming says, and I can talk about that offline and explain it, but Wyoming's got it. That's the only state where you can perfect a security interest in digital asset through control.
And
That's pretty.
I have to ask one question. On this.
Yes, sir.
Now we talk about states in the US.
Yeah,
Crypto in general, they're good.
yeah.
So there are a lot of states that's like nation states
Yeah.
outside of US and
Yeah.
other laws. That, for example,
Sure.
Switzerland.
Yeah.
How do you see the laws of Switzerland and like the kind of the shelter they provide for startups around, for example, security, insurance, ICOs, STOs, and others? How do you see that influencing Wyoming, for example, influencing other states in the US?
Well,
So in the case of Wyoming and FINMA in Switzerland, like literally House Bill 70, the idea of the open blockchain token was based on one of the categories. Like Switzerland has the 3 categories, right? Like payment token, asset token, and yeah, it's
Third one.
a third.
Yeah.
Where the asset token is really a security token, right? Yeah, the utility token.
they call it they call
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
So utility token
Thank you.
that has become so tarnished. Utility token. Now we call it consumptive token.
Yes. And okay, so I don't remember what FINMA calls it.
Yeah, but in
but
Delaware,
they
anyway.
like actually looked to that for purposes of drafting, House Bill 70. So I do think that there is some sort of influence coming across, and even if you look at like what the FCA is putting out in terms for requests for comment, it has similar categories, right, with different names, of course. But I do think that Wyoming has been looking broadly at the rest of the world, and I think it's helpful to all of us in the U.S. to kind of have that focus. So we may look at Switzerland and say, oh, well, that's Switzerland. But if it's Wyoming, it's right in our backyard.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interject. 2 small things. It paves the way. Like I worked with the Governor's Council in Colorado. They were like, we looked at UCC and it undoes Wyoming, so we're going to vote it down. They killed all the UCC legislation in Colorado, and they said, look, we're going to make sure that we're not going to do something that undoes good things that are happening elsewhere. And by the way, we're going to work with New Mexico and Arizona, and we're going to start to band together to make sure that what we pass is supported in a cohesive strategy, so the federal government can basically take a look and say, oh, that worked, let's make that federal.
So
And what happened in Switzerland and so forth.
one thing, I think that Wyoming actually has been quite magnanimous in that they want to share. They want the other states to adopt these laws, which is, not necessarily to their advantage.
So let's now take a step back from Wyoming and everyone else. I think one of the cool things about Wyoming, why it matters, why any Switzerland matters, is because this is an instance blockchain in the law where we as a society, and I mean the global society, are sort of figuring out how all this is going to work, right? How are we going to deal with the different cultures around money, anonymity, personal information? In America, we've got a very different perspective than in Switzerland, right? And how are we as a global community going to deal with that? And I think Wyoming and Switzerland are great examples of how that works. The next sort of moving then into the farther future of sort of how does this all play out from a legal perspective? One of the things we were talking about earlier was the concept of identity, right? Most of us, probably all of us, are carrying some form of government-issued ID right now, right? And that is the core way that we interact with society, with our governments, right? But that only covers, 2 billion out of the 5 billion people on the planet, right? And now we're talking about a system that if we truly want it to be decentralized and truly want it to be public, that needs to accommodate all 5 billion, right? So, Michael, I just wanted to turn to you sort of to get your sort of longer vision thoughts on where this all plays out for blockchain.
Yes, thanks. So basically what I think, one of the really cool things that happened with the invention of crypto back in 2009, were basically that you suddenly had 2 billion people who got their first bank account overnight. Everyone had access to banking. They could store up wealth, send money, then send wire internationally and so on. And moving 6 years further to 2015 and Ethereum, in principle, the entire planet had now access to wireless smart contracts, access to product futures, hedging, investment in private equity, and so on. And now we have like a legal regime around that tries to figure out where are we on that. And basically that was created before we had this kind of technological ability to offer these things. So when I think about the vision of all this and like where we should move it, it's more like how do we in the long term think about, for example, identity as one of the things playing in there. And normally you say, well, if 2 billion people in the world lacks identity, we should solve that problem. I would turn it around and say, well, it might be that the 5 billion other people don't need an identity anymore, at least when it comes to finance. And we can just transact and we can handle things there. So the ability to actually, out of your transaction patterns, create personas and figure out what you're doing, are you high risk or low risk, and still at the same time identify the person. And meaning identify is basically a very simple version of catch them if they do something bad. Because that's what the day is all about. You actually want to find them and put them in jail or do something like that. And that's really like, that's possible today. You don't really need physical identity papers and state papers. So the ID you got from your state just lost one value, like you don't really need for access to finance anymore. And that I think is cool, and that will probably change some laws, not in 1 year, not in 2 years, not in possibly in 10 years, but it's going to take a while, but we will see some movements in that line. Jumping a little bit backwards to some of the stuff, now we can talk about security laws and so on. I think that's extremely interesting because it happens right now. It's also like not really happening yet, so that's because it's not really being used to that extent. If you look at the laws and the tensions we had around crypto, and since like 2013, where FinCEN issued a guidance to say like kind of this is high risk business, banks don't touch it, it's dangerous and so on. And that ability to basically reminding the business that you need to treat it if you're an exit point or an exit point for crypto, you need to KYC the customer, you need to figure out who they are, you need to be able to basically what they're saying, help us identify the customer or find them if they do something bad. That was super important because it basically meant we're working in Chainalysis with law enforcement offices like companies, or not companies, like agencies worldwide, also here in the US. And what we saw, the only country that could basically start cases and build cases around crypto for US. There's been cases in Europe and a lot of other countries, but they all start out US. And there's like thousands of SARs being filed in US every year in terms of like crypto exchanges sending SARs there. They give different data points to start cases where some people are doing bad stuff, and they trickle into Europe. And in Europe, there's still not really any laws around that. So if you're a crypto exchange in Europe, you're not obliged to take KYC. And if you have suspicious activity happening, you can report it to police. You can't tell it to regulator. You can't file a suspicious report. You can essentially take your customer that you're in money on every day and report it to
Mike,
police.
I'm going to ask you a follow-up.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
So I think that the European thing is awful.
Oh,
That's
okay.
why I'm changing
That is really
Yeah.
surprising. I mean,
It is.
because
It's
I know that so
Yeah.
before we came in, he told us the long-term vision for and you should tell them because time is running out. But that surprises me.
No,
that you say
because
that.
like what I see, so basically what I have seen is basically that as long as you have different touch points that can help you find people, basically, that's what it is.
But
Like
I thought you were looking for the future was going to be completely anonymous. That
No, not anonymous.
No, okay.
No, there's a huge difference. So,
All right.
so for example, Bitcoin is a censorship resistant network. So basically no one can prevent me from sending you a Bitcoin.
Okay.
But I can't prevent anyone from figuring out that I did it. And that's completely different. So basically it means that, well, in a normal banking system, well, they can prevent you from sending me money. They can freeze my funds. But you can't do that in crypto. And that's like a huge difference. I'm not an advocate for anonymity. I think that's like, at the end of the day, that's not really how it should work.
Oh, okay. But it sounds like you want to have, you don't want people to prevent you, and right now in Europe, there really aren't any requirements for the exchanges to, so it's much harder to find people. So it sounds like you don't want people to prevent you, but you're willing to make it easier in Europe for people to find you. Or the bad guys.
No, so like there's a difference between anonymity and that is the concept. So basically, what I state basically today is that you don't need an identity to be able to be found.
Oh, okay.
That's the thing. So basically, we carry this one, all of us, and that is the de facto identity. So the concept of like the physical IDs and KYC is kind of not really that needed anymore. So you can easily find people today. So that's like not a thing, and that means that you can immediately include 2 billion people, which is cool. if you change some laws around that. So that's like actually the way that I proceed.
I just want to draw like a quick distinction, or maybe like tease it out from you, because I think this is something we had discussed a little bit prior to the panel, right? The distinction between, say, like token sales, like altcoins, whatever you want to say, like ICOs, SQs, that sort of a thing, from I think what you're talking about more in terms of like the Bitcoins of the world. Just because I think in Europe and throughout the world, I believe that they do have rules relating to like KYC, AML, like money laundering things for many sales. I don't know. I'm not
for crypto. So for crypto, no. So basically,
but
that's
for securities.
You mean
He's
like
talking Bitcoin. He's talking about
Bitcoin, like the different,
That's all
yeah. So if you
clarify.
talk about like the securities there, I think there's more like a let's wait and see what happens kind of thing. I can't remember there's been any enforcement actions in Europe so far. I think that's been left to the US.
But were you, Michael, were you suggesting earlier that you would like to see securities move in the same direction as crypto, so that
yeah,
that's what I thought you were
what I was
saying.
around security. So the interesting thing, basically, I think the law that we have here in the US around like actually being able to take KYC to buy and sell crypto in bigger amounts, so it isn't in bigger amounts. I still tend to sell crypto in smaller amounts, but in bigger amounts, I become a money service business. I need to be registered and all that. That's very, very good because it enables us to like catch bad guys in the system. If you look at it from then what happens if you look at securities? This is not about finding people. This is consumer protection, and that changes everything because then it's more like, can we as a state kind of feel that it's okay for us to allow you to buy something and take that risk? And that's a very, very strange kind of setup. So basically, the setup is today. And now, like, it's long term, we're not trying to change the law tomorrow, but basically the only high-risk financial instrument we can offer people with that's not accredited investors today is online poker.
It's online what?
Online poker. You play online
Poker.
Poker
Okay.
online. So that's basically what you do. Is that good or is it bad? Or is it better for them to buy like other securities? Other securities work better. If you talk about ICOs, probably a little bit dangerous as well, but compared to online poker, I'm not sure it's that bad.
And then that goes to a point that you were saying about, I think, accredited investors, because we've got all sorts of regulation around that. And will this type of technology, sort of as we get more comfortable with this technology, will we be able to use the technology to protect investors in a way that allow more people in?
So just to now bring it back from our faraway vision back to sort of the day-to-day world that we live in, because we still live in a world where, as a legal system, as a society, we have decided that certain actions are not okay, right? And we can't have systems that enable those actions, right? And therefore, there are these know your customer, anti-money laundering laws. We have to have ways for law enforcement to catch, child sex slavery, like whatever it may be, right? We all agree on that. And sort of going from this long-term vision, but keeping in mind that we as a society have sort of come to those conclusions, I think that's an interesting part where the law and blockchain meet, right? Because many people in the blockchain world would say that blockchain is all about anonymity, right? Whether it be Zcash or whatnot. It's all about your ability to transact without anyone else knowing what you're doing, regardless. And I think so. Look, we've got 5 minutes left. I'd look for some sort of final comments from each of you, sort of your key point to take away from this. Any of you guys want to jump in to start?
So like when you say about anonymity, so my view on the blockchain space, it's about censorship-free transactions. So it means that no one can prevent you from sending money, but that doesn't mean that you're anonymous when you do it. I think that's like a very important distinction.
Yeah. And with talking with my kids, like anything that you do on the internet can be tracked and traced, right? And essentially that goes to what you're...
Yeah, so, and I think that's fine. That's part of our society. It probably should be that way. Because it's like, I have an analysis typically where we say, if you look at Zcash, for example, and the requirement of complete anonymity there, as I see it, well, you don't really need that. It's similar to say like, well, you can own a gun, like Second Amendment things and so on, you can do that. But if you wanted that to be a gun with the ability to kill people at distance without being discovered, that would be a pretty bad scenario. And that's basically what you do with saying like, we want anonymous transactions that no one can trace. Because anonymous transaction means you can build up power without no one to figure out that it happens. That's dangerous. It's destabilizing.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I would say is let's realize that the states and regulation of the states really can have a big impact. And because we all live in the states and we're close to people who are decision makers and influencers, we all can make an impact. So if you have an idea, whether it's pro-Wyoming, against Wyoming laws, or something else, I encourage everybody to start digging into this because it will, I think, eventually impact you.
Yeah. Wyoming is essentially a straw man, right?
Yeah,
You all
absolutely.
have to beat up on it to get to the right result. Josh, you want a final word?
Sure. I guess mine would be like, while we might have ideas about whether anonymity or pseudonymity are important goals, something that folks want, or while some others may have views that there is value or there may be less value in the new guidance that comes out from various regulators, I think it's important just to remind us that this is an interesting intellectual exercise, but ultimately there are laws. The laws apply. You have to figure out how they apply to your transactions, and talk to lawyers, talk to regulators, and I feel like it's very easy to get into the intellectual debates of what would be a good and what would be a goal. And I think ultimately though, for the industry and having a healthy and compliant industry, we need to look at the laws and how they apply.
Was that legal?
No.
Definitely not legal advice. Well, thank you all for joining us. It's been fun, at least for us, at least for me. Welcome, connect with any of us. We're happy to talk to you. So thank you.
Thank you.